Here is one mistake that people make for every single hero in the game. Starting out with AFK, staying down for too long is a big mistake. Getting 2 free drops is all your hero power ever does, so use that tempo and momentum to level quickly to tier 3 and 4 and snowball from there. With Alakir, too many people just build one big unit and then have it up in front, which is strong in the early mid game, but you just lose to a single Leroy later on. Alexstrasza, if your entire game plan is just leveling to 5 and hoping you hit Caligos, you're not gonna do well. Try and get some pairs or triples locked and have some outs to pivot into once you're on tier 5. Just stay flexible. On Fallen, too many people get baited by the cards that they have to choose. They're a good indicator of what cards you should be buying in the early mid game to set up for it, but don't just hard force the composition already without having the major tools, because that will just get you killed before you even get there. Arana Star Seeker, I think the biggest issue is that people play this hero in the wrong lobby. Make sure there is no Murlocs when you're trying to do a tier 2 strategy, or you will just lose to a single Sephin. On Rafam, when you accidentally triple something from hero power, don't just instantly play it and discover a 3 drop or a 4 drop. Be sure to hold the triple in hand. Too many people triple too early and then lose out on a lot of potential. Brukan, I think a lot of people just start using the Death Rattle hero power a little bit too early, when the plus half and taunt is usually stronger depending on the kind of board you have, of course, in the earlier turns. With Gatun, a big mistake I see is people either overvaluing the hero power or undervaluing it. Either you go all the way, start hero powering on turn 1 and have that be your main skilling, or you either play without this hero power at all. It's not a great hero, but just pressing it occasionally every few turns is never gonna be a good idea. Captain Adora, the big mistake is that a lot of people think you need to go for a second dig, but usually your first dig is the main one that matters. Only go for a second dig if you can afford to and have the gold. With Hook Tusk, just take every token you see. Too many people pass up tokens for stronger cards, even though tokens literally allow you to buy and create more cards out of thin air using your hero power. With Cariel, the biggest mistake I see is people trying to hero power every single turn again. This hero power is not that good. You shouldn't just sell a unit to hero power. It's not worth it. On Chevala, too many people hard force elementals. Don't just roll for them and only buy them. Be sure that you stay alive as well in the process. With Cookie, it's important to know what tribes are really good to hero power early on. So don't just hero power Murlocs or demons, but preferably you are able to hero power a Quillbor, a mech, or something along those lines. The cards that are strong on tier 3. With Dancing Daryl, the biggest mistake is that people just still don't know how to dance. You want to stay down and just be able to put a really big Pubbot or Trickster on the board. Just doing one big pop-off turn every couple turns is good enough to get you some free ranks. With Death Speaker Blackform, the biggest mistake that I see everyone make is force Quillbors. You can just use your hero power as tempo to be really strong to power level. You can kind of play whatever comp you get handed. Sometimes that's Quillbors, but sometimes that's not. On that thing, the biggest mistake is that people don't see this hero power as a tool, but more as a win condition. Use this hero power to your advantage to be strong early mid game, and then still look for something to do in the late game. Dino Tamer Brand, I think the biggest mistake is people not holding cards in hand for the turn that they gave Brand. So for example, if you're holding an Alikhead or a Naga and you're getting Brand next turn from hero power, just hold them in hand. Take like 1 or 2 more damage, but get a lot of extra gold in return. On Drektar, the biggest mistake is picking this hero. At Dune Van Cleef, the biggest mistake is again treating this hero power as your main source of scaling. The hero power is pretty nice to build a big Deflector or Hydra, but don't let it be the only way that you're gonna buff up your board. With Elise, don't just open every map blindly. It's not because you have a map in hand that you have to use it. If your shop is better or good, and let's say you're tier 4 and you still have a tier 2 map in hand, you don't have to use it. Now a quick word from the sponsor of this video, Firestone, which is a deck tracker that I'm currently using. The amount of stats that this offers is pretty insane. From of course seeing when you're gonna get 99% lethal, to all the minions that are in the lobby, additional stuff like your lost opponent's board, and a bunch of other overlay features like seeing when opponents level and triple. And then the application itself, where you can see your previous fights, you can simulate all of these battles and see the outcome if you would change something. You could track your MMR. You can see perfect boards and perfect games from other people, and my game is included that I had yesterday. There's a lot of things here to explore and to mess around with. If you want to try it out yourself, it's completely free as well. Check the link in the description below. Back to the video. With Omu, all your hero power does is give you gold for leveling, so don't stay down on tier 3 for too long, which I do see a lot of people doing. Just go to 4 and then to 5. On Flurgle, I think the biggest mistake is forcing triples early. Flurgle naturally just finds a lot of triples in the mid game to triple into 5 drops, so there's no reason to freeze them or set up for them in the early game. Instead, just go for strength and tempo. With Galakron, the biggest mistake people make is getting too greedy. If you have a good 4 or 5 drop, it's better to just take that already than shoot for a 6 and miss. With Galewing, the biggest mistake is people not leveling correctly. The difference between Galewing and Cookie is Cookie can level and then hero power, while with Galewing you need to level first, and then next turn at the start of your turn you will discover from a higher tier. So be sure you level the turn before your hero power would trigger. Too many people on George do not hard look look for Gem Splitter. Gem Splitter is such a broken card right now in the right hands. You kind of want to do anything in your power to get that single unit on the board. Greybow players like forcing frogs a little bit too much. Stay flexible, just be strong and level, and if you hit Baron and frogs, then you can start going for it. With Guff, I'm kind of gonna give the same advice as with Carriel, just don't value the hero power. It's pretty much the same, but just a worse version. Just don't press it unless you have a gold left. The big bait with Illidan is taking stuff like early Macaws and early Hydras without having synergy yet, just because it works with your hero power. You're just gonna die without strength on the board. It's good for a late game, but not for a mid game. As Infinite Toki, you don't need to buy the card that you hero power into every turn. It's not because you hero power into 5 that you're obligated to take it. If it's bad and there's better 4 drops, just roll. With any Stormcrawl, it's important to remember to not keep your Avenge board for too long. People just keep all of these little Death Rattle and Avenge cards way too long in the mid game and end up dying. Janda's Barrow's biggest mistake is people playing the tripled Alley Cat. Just hold your triples in hand for at least 5 drops. On Sunstride or Kaltas, don't just wait gold trying to land the perfect buff. Just use your buffs for good early tempo. No need to be wasting money just hitting a better card. Asking Mukla, a big mistake is people staying down for too long. You want to use your bananas and momentum to level. Kurtr's Ashfallen is a pretty weird hero. I think the biggest mistake that people make with him is not setting up for his final dance, which is not too easy to complete most of the time. On Lich Bazial, too many people don't hero power every turn. In the early mid game, there's no reason to not hero power unless you're dropping way too low in health, but the early gold is gonna make the difference. On Lord Barrow, too many people just choose their bet way too early. You gotta wait until the last second because people could still level or triple in the last second and mess up your entire game plan. Lord Jaraxxus, I think he's removed from the game. On Maiev, the major mistake that people make is not hero powering on turn 1. This is a tip that the rank 1 player in NA Chief gave in my latest guide, and it's been a game changer for me. On Malygos, you don't really want to level to tier 2 if there's Beast and Lullaby. You want to stay on 1 and find that alley cat. Short reminder that if you do enjoy this video so far, leaving it a like would be very much appreciated. Also, the majority of people that watch this is still not subscribed, so if you want to catch more content like this, that'd be very much appreciated. Thank you. On Moss and Wen, too many people get baited by the hero power. Don't just use your hero power every turn because you have to. It's okay to skip it. On Millhouse, a lot of people just pick strength early on, but anything that is economy is good. You're usually stronger than your opponents anyway. Just take the money. As Maleficent, too many people force max in the mid-end game, but you should just be using your hero power for early tempo so you don't lose fights on lower tiers. You can level and then maybe find something else to do. On Bigglesworth, the biggest mistake is people playing way too safe and just forcing stuff like Wrath Reaver Demons. This is a composition that will also deal damage to yourself, and you just need to lose 1 or 2 fights and you're dead. So play strong comps and strong tempo, but don't tunnel vision into it too much. A big mistake I see with Mutinous is people using the hero power as your main way to have a game plan, but if your entire game plan is just building, let's say, 1 big deflecto, you're not gonna win. On Azov, too many people hard force Frog. Frog is good, you want to set up for it, but don't just force it. As with everything, stay open and flexible. With Nosdormu, here's a hidden little mistake that I see from time to time, and that is when you played a card with a free refresh, like Recycling Wraith or Refreshing Anomaly, you need to use that refresh at the end of your turn, because your hero power will overwrite it at the start of next turn, and then you basically lost that roll. With Onyxia, the big mistake is that people don't realize the hero power is strictly tempo. You can use it early mid game with Avenge synergies and just having a strong board, but it's not winning you the game, so use that hero power to level. On Overlord Starfang, too many people use their hero power every single turn. You don't have to. Just hero power when you find something useful and you think it's actually gonna end up being better than using that 1 call differently. With Ozumat, you don't just need to be down a unit to summon the taunt. Very often in the end game or even in the mid game already, it is better to play a full board than to have your taunt summoned. On Patches, the big mistake is people just leveling to tier 5, not hitting Hogger and dying. Your hero power gives insane tempo. Be sure you use it properly. On Patchwork, you have a lot of health to work with. Doesn't mean that you have to play demons. A lot of people force Weaver with this hero, which doesn't make that much sense. Use your health as a tool to level instead. The new Pyramid, the big mistake I see with him is people using the hero power too early or too late. There's no set rule to when you should use it, just use it when you feel like you are gonna start getting amazing value from it. This is usually between the 5 to 7 range. Queen Ashara players do anything to get the hero power online, but if it's gonna get you killed, it's not worth it. No reason to drop to 10 HP but get your hero power on turn 5 or 6. It's probably better to just be really strong, value tempo, and activate your hero power 1 or 2 turns later. The big Queen Wag toggle mistake is forcing Menagerie. Just use your hero power for tempo to level. level early, but don't have those cards become permanent on your board. Unless, of course, you hit the perfect nuts. With Ragnaros, you don't just want to let your hero power do all the work, because +6/+6 a turn doesn't win the game. And as a Rakanishu player as well, the big mistake is hero powering every turn. Just only do it when you feel like you can afford to. It's a really bad hero power. On Reno, the big mistake is people not checking the tribes in the lobby. That's gonna make the main difference between tripling into a 4, 5 or 6 and hero powering that card, sometimes more than the amount of health that you have. A big Rarran mistake that people make is people picking up units just for scaling using the hero power in the mid-late game. Early game, your hero power is nice to scale up stuff like Bubbots, but don't just take a Hydra when it's turn 8, because it's not gonna scale up. As a Scabs player, too many people hero power every single turn. You do want to hero power every turn early on, but in the mid-late game, you kind of know what your opponent is doing, and sometimes you get no value from pressing that button, so don't do it then. The biggest shitwork mistake is people picking mediocre cards on tier 1. You always want to just roll and buy Battle Cry cards. They give you money or Alley Cat. The big Silas mistake is buying bad tickets. If you're on tier 3, don't just buy a bad one drop because it has a ticket on it. That's gonna result in just you being actually weaker. When it comes to Syndragosa, the hero power in the mid-late game is not really for stats, but just so you can freeze a single card in the shop instead of having to full freeze, so use it accordingly. On Finley, don't get baited into a bad hero power just because it works with a decent shop on tier 1. What I mean is, don't take for example Maleficent if you have 2 Pebbles in your shop instead of a hero like Scabs that can snowball way more in the next coming turns. A big Crag mistake is people trying to get full value from the hero power. Just use it on the turn that you expect to spike, either with a triple or with a big level turn. Sneed, you just shouldn't care about your hero power. You don't really need to be focusing on using it on some cards on your board. Maybe in the late game or in the mid game it could be alright, but that's about it. Thompson's biggest mistake is using the hero power as direction. It's a good tool, but it is not what is gonna win you the game. On Tavish, it's important to know when to switch from aim high to aim right or aim low. You aim high most of the time in the early mid game to get most value, but aim right and aim low is gonna get rid of more important cards later on. Too many test players stay down to hero power and steal an entire board just to face another opponent, hero power and steal another board. Be smart about what you want. Don't just try and take everything. With the Curator, too many people get too attached to their hero power. It's fine to sell that little amalgam. Yes, it truly is. Don't feel bad about it. With Akazamzrak, for some reason I see a lot of people do the normal curve, but you definitely want to rough farm curve with this. Try and get Ice Block up as early as possible so you don't have to worry about it anymore. On Lich King, the big mistake is people still forcing stuff like Reborn Leroy, even when you have a bad matchup like Reborn Beasts. Reborn Leroy is nice and great, but not in every single scenario, so keep that in mind. The Rat King's biggest mistake is people still using the hero power in the mid-late game. +2/+2 is not worth it then. Just take whatever fits your board best. On Ticketus, the biggest mistake people make is actually not taking a tier 1 pair early on, because you have a spell that could discover you a 1-drop and then easily find you a triple. The biggest Galliwick mistake is not getting your money up and running. You want to be buying and selling as much as possible, as early as possible, so that way you can just easily start snowballing on something like tier 4. The biggest Vandar mistake is, well, also taking this hero. I don't know, I never played this guy. On Varden, you don't need to be buying every pair that you see in the shop. It's not worth it, and in the end you're gonna be stuck with a whole lot of pairs and no triples. Take the ones that are actually good. On Vol'jin, the biggest mistake is people forcing a specific comp early on. Just use your hero power for any stats that you can collect, and even in the mid-late game, whenever you find a card, you can easily transfer the stats still onto that. As Xyrella, somehow I see a lot of people level way too early. You almost always want to do a farm curve or a warrior curve, so staying down on tier 1. On Yashiraj, I think the biggest mistake I still see way too much is people hero powering every turn. If you're in tier 5 and 6 and you already got your composition set up, selling a card to hero power often isn't worth it unless there's something specific you're still looking for. Yogg's big mistake is gambling on the hero power. If there's a line that's more consistent, it's very often better to take that than trying to hit a 1 and 3 pressing your button. With Ysera, don't take bad dragons because they're pairs. Don't take double red whelp early on, stuff like that. On Zephrys, the biggest mistake is people getting too greedy with your hero power. If you need a triple to survive, just triple whatever you can. And that was one big mistake for every hero in the game. If you want to catch one tip for every hero in the game instead, check out the video that is on the screen right now. Thank you for watching.